Hello, everyone. Justin Stivers. Thank you guys for tuning in and listening to another episode of the Stivers Show. We got Jared Correa with us today, who's going to make me look really bad because he's a podcast extraordinaire. So, Jared, what's going on, man?
I won't make you look too bad. I just have a large microphone. That's all. This is a prop. I'm not even actually speaking into this.
You definitely look more professional.
Well, thank you kindly. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.
No, thank you, man. Appreciate it. So Jared, you've got a Red Cave Consulting, you got a consulting business working with attorneys, but we were talking before, you also got a lot of podcasts, been doing this for a little while, but I'd like to turn it over to you. What do you do? Who are you? And all that stuff.
Yeah. So I'm a former practicing attorney, and I've got really two businesses I work on most of the time. One is this consulting company called Red Cave Law Firm Consulting, and I advise attorneys on how to grow their practices, become more efficient, just improve their businesses, because attorneys don't necessarily do a lot of thinking about how to improve their businesses. I've got a software company that I have with a co-owner that's called Gideon. And what that does is chatbot software for law firms. So it does chatbot intake on websites, online scheduling, and document assembly wrapped into the same product. That's been out of beta for about 6 months, and we're getting pretty good traction on that. And then, I got a couple podcasts as well, among other things. So I've had a podcast with the Legal Talk Network since like 2006, believe it or not, which is crazy. That's called the Legal Toolkit. And then I have a podcast and content series with Above the Law that's called the Legal Tech Non-Event.
Yeah, so let's talk on the podcast for a minute. So that's interesting to me. Why, 2006, that was like kind of in the beginning of it, right? You had to be one of the first, way beginning.
We had one of the first legal podcasts, I think, if I remember correctly.
What drew you into it? Like, what did you see that, hey, this makes sense? Or you just like wanted to be at your house talking, doing your own thing without anybody having to see you?
Mostly if I can get away without wearing pants and somebody approaches me with that idea, I'm like, I'm in. But I was still actually working for another company at that point, and I was actually going into an office every day, shirt and tie kind of thing. And I'm always like open to trying new media, and that's social media, that's different broadcast tools. So I was like, podcast sounds like something that's really interesting. Sounds like it has a lot of growth potential. And then whenever I try to do something, I try to make sure it's niched so that it's in my market. And so I said, okay, podcast for lawyers sounds like a great idea. And so I jumped on it. And for me, and we were talking about this a little bit before we came on, like writing is like a high effort option. So I always have been invested in content marketing as I've marketed the businesses. And I felt like, okay, if I can do a podcast, then it takes me probably a quarter of the time for me to write a white paper or a substantive article. So I thought that might save me some time and probably be more effective in terms of getting views and eyes on that. So that's one reason I did it, was I thought it had a lot of growth potential. The other reason I did it tracks back to my reticence for wearing pants, which is it's going to be easy to do.
What was like the response? Because attorneys, as you know, being one and being around them, are a really unique, difficult breed of individuals. And so where was there interest, and what's kind of like what shift have you seen over that time? Because obviously there's so many podcasts, and I know the podcast that you have is very popular and you got a lot of listeners and everything. But what was, but I also know lawyers are very like, oh, you can't say that. And very
right.
So what's kind of been the transition that you've seen?
I have had some older lawyers slap my hand from time to time, but I shake it off. So what's interesting is when we started the podcast, it was like very traditional lawyer centric. And we were focused on things that lawyers were worried about in a law practice management sphere, because that's what I talk about all day. So I know that pretty well. So we would do podcasts on like data security. So there was a Massachusetts, I'm from Massachusetts. There was the Massachusetts data security law at one point that came out. Big news, lawyers were interested in that. So I'm like, let's talk about data security. We would do podcasts on trust accounting, that kind of thing. And at that point, there were very few podcasts focused on lawyers at all. So we could talk about anything business related, no matter how dry it was, and people would listen. And now it's a different game because everybody's got a podcast. And you got to do something that's a little bit different. So over the course of time, we eventually shifted the show, and now we rebooted the whole thing. So now instead of just a straight podcast discussing legal issues, we've kind of converted that into essentially like a late night talk show format. I do a monologue, we do a quick interview with the guest, and then we do a sketch of some kind, which the guest is involved in. And the thesis behind that is twofold. One is like you want to differentiate yourself from the market. So if you've got, excuse me, a different format from everybody else, that's going to be really compelling to people. And then two, we had this idea that like, hey, lawyers are human beings too, as it turns out, and they probably have interests outside of the legal practice. So let's talk about some of that. And it's been really interesting. There's been a much more positive response when we've talked about non-legal issues and kind of thrown them in with the legal stuff than I would have thought. Like the response has been really great. And we've actually gained listeners since we've changed the format. I'll talk about things like Jim Carrey's acting career, video games I play with my kids, sports, and people seem to really gravitate to that. And I think it's this whole thing of like, especially now during the pandemic, everybody has kind of gotten a window into everybody else's personal lives. Like, who hasn't been on a Zoom call where somebody's kid is like climbing the kitchen a cabinet and is looking for snacks? Like, it's a totally different world. So we try to hit that, and I like the way it's gone. So yeah, I think if you're doing a podcast now, it's going to be really unique to get people to listen to it on a recurring basis.
So it's an interesting transition because I definitely have seen that where in the beginning it was, let's talk about legal stuff. Let's talk about new cases that come out. And then like, as that generation aged, younger generation was like, I don't want to talk about that. That's super boring. And then, over the past
Right.
couple of years, it was still is, but maybe even a little bit less because it's so saturated. It was very like how to market your law firm, how to run a law firm, how to do all of that. And now that's like
Right.
everybody's talking about that. There's so many
Yeah.
people trying to teach that. And it sounds like you're pivoting from that. And now you're like, let's just entertain the lawyers. Let's just
Yes.
let's just be
Yes.
entertaining. And I'm curious on that last piece though, like why do you limit it to lawyers? Like, are you just like, is it like, hey, this is lawyers are going to get this type of humor? Or now that you're kind of like in the entertainment business, is it like, let's open up to everybody?
Well, it's interesting. So we're the number 3 business podcast in Ghana, which was a surprise to me.
In
And
Ghana, the country?
Ghana, yes. So we look at these stats and like, it's funny where you pop up. I think we were like number 2 in politics in India, like a couple weeks back or something. It's just really weird. Like, so what I found is that while our audience is still mainly lawyers, because we're talking about stuff that lawyers are interested in, if you've got somebody who's a business owner and they say, oh, I've listened to enough of these episodes, like this is viable to me, even though I'm not an attorney. Yeah, we do get some non-legal listeners, and some people just listen for like the entertainment part of it, like just to see what we're going to talk about next, which is great. That's ultimately what I want. I think the product will always focus on legal just because we're part of like the Legal Talk network, so we can't stray too far. But we do get non-legal listeners, and I think that will continue. And the other thing I should mention is like we try to also not do the standard stuff that people have been talking about for like 20 years. So we try to hit hotter topics in the legal space like productization, subscription services, um, you know, web marketing in a pandemic, that type of thing, which we try to stay current. And I will tell you, like one thing we had done was we record a lot of episodes and we put them in a can for a while. And when we released those episodes, it was like 6 months after we recorded it. So I was talking about like the NBA finals and it was like January and it just seemed weird. So what we tried to do is stick to hotter topics, record and then release in the next week and added some entertainment value. And it's been really great. So having the lawyer base is helpful, but then I do think we're expanding into other business owners and probably other people who just think it's a cool show, which is what I wanted.
Where do you see the kind of void in the marketplace for attorneys? Because I know you're in that consulting space and you work with a lot of clients, law firms privately. But again, it's just been on my mind lately because I feel like I see so many attorneys now turning marketing gurus or turning, let me teach you how to do this. And it's just like, it's normal. I mean, a lot of businesses are like that. A lot of, you
Yeah.
had that for dentists and chiropractors and stuff like that. But I'm just kind of, I think law was like one of the last professional spaces to kind of catch up just because it's so regulated and
Yeah.
people are so scared of it. But I'm curious, like what you see since you work with the law firm owners and then, obviously with what you're doing now, like where's, where's there kind of like a void that attorneys are not getting attention, if any?
Yeah, no, it's an interesting question because it's kind of a twofold question. So in the first instance, um, every attorney I've ever talked to wants to do something else. Like
That's
across, like
true.
every attorney I talk to, they're like, "Hey, I wish I was a history professor. I'm just going to tell you. I don't tell everybody that kind of thing." Like there's always some confession like that, and I'm like, "Yeah, I know," and nobody wants to be a lawyer. So then, what do you do with that? How do you channel that energy? So I've seen attorneys do two things. They'll try to reformat a law practice in a more modern way. So what I think is really interesting is there's now this whole mixing of legal services and legal products. So you see lawyers selling documents, you see lawyers selling knowledge bases, courses. Everybody wants to do subscriptions. And that's really interesting. Like there's still a lot of space. So if you're talking about a marketplace void, a market inefficiency, like if you're a law firm that's charging by the hour and that's all you do, legal consumers, I think, are slowly starting to trend away from that. So they want alternative pricing structures. They want alternative services and products. So if you're a lawyer who wants to revamp your practice and do it in a modern way, that's what I'd be looking for. Products, services, how do those mix? I've seen some lawyers who will release courses and do consulting as well. It's really interesting. And then the other aspect of this is I've seen some lawyers who are like, okay, I've done something spectacularly well in my legal practice, and now I want to teach other attorneys to do it. And it's very hard to run a law firm and also a consulting business. I'll tell you, like I run a consulting business and it's a full-time job on its own. And if some lawyer wants to dip their toe in that, it's hard to do it as like an outside project. So I see a lot of lawyers doing courses, mastermind groups, that kind of thing, and dipping their toe in, which I think is great because there are lawyers who are modernizing their law firms. It's a handful of attorneys, and the more the word gets out about that, the better the profession will be as a whole. Because the other big specter with this is that a state like Arizona is now allowing for non-lawyer ownership in law firms. A lot of lawyers don't understand that their competition is not the schmo estate planning attorney down the street. It's LegalZoom, Rocket Lawyer. Like that's a wholly different marketplace now. And that's coming, that's going to be everywhere before you know it. So I like the fact that lawyers are diversifying and modernizing their practice. And I wish more would do it. And the more lawyers that dip their toe in providing information and courses for attorneys on how to get it done is great, as far as I'm concerned.
So do you kind of, are you coaching your clients to do that? Are you trying to find ways? Because I know you've got this software now. So it looks like you, and
Yeah.
I know you're big into efficiency and everything. So is that, hey, how do we make your practice more efficient? And I think you got to stop charging by the hour. And you get, because you're a dinosaur at this point.
I have a lot of the dinosaur conversations for sure. And I have it in the construct that may be surprising. So like it's amazing to me that lawyers are still clinging to old ways, right? When there's been a global pandemic. Like and when I talk to firms now, it's like, what are you waiting for to change up? Like the global pandemic wasn't enough for you waiting for like an asteroid to strike the Yucatan Peninsula. Like, what is the play here? So in terms of what I do with clients, a lot of it is talking about alternative structures of running a business. A lot of it is focused on efficiency. Lawyers are not very efficient at all. They're not focused on efficiency. They don't use efficiency metrics. So when I talk to law firms, I try to have them develop workflows, generate more efficiency, and then also use analytics to keep tabs on that. So even if all you did was like track utilization rate, you know a whole lot more about your business than most attorneys do. So that's a big piece of the consulting component. How do you get as efficient as possible? Because until you get as efficient as possible, you don't know how to maximize your law firm and you don't even know how to delegate the work. And frankly, you don't even know what you should be doing as an attorney. So you're putting band-aids over a problem instead of focusing on what the real issue is. So efficiency, new models. I talk to attorneys about that all the time. I think a lot of attorneys think, okay, I'm charging by the hour now. I don't want to charge by subscription tomorrow. but you don't necessarily do it that way. Like you don't like say, all right, January 1st, everyone, we're doing subscriptions. That's going to be a massive loop that you're going to throw your clients for. So I tell people, like, view it like a beta. So run it out there, have some conversations, see if there are clients who are interested, test it, it'll break, and then fix it. And on the software side, the other problem I see is law firms don't have any semblance of an intake process in their businesses. They lose leads, they can't convert leads. It takes an average of 8 emails to schedule an appointment with a law firm. 64% of the law firm voicemails go unanswered. Like, that's just untenable. That's why lawyers lose business. You might as well light that marketing money on fire. So on the tech side, we said, okay, let's streamline the intake process. You got a conversational interface, which people like. They can take a next step to book an appointment, and then you can do some document generation off of that to save your staff time. So everything we do in terms of building the software products is focused on efficiency, but that's just a byproduct of how I do the consulting.
I mean, there's so much there, and it almost like makes my blood boil to think about like the way some people run their. You'll talk to someone like, who answers your phone? Like, I do. Like every single time.
Right.
Like when, do you have nobody else who answers the phone? I mean, it's just, yeah, like you said, just keeping simple metrics. How many people called you last month? How many intakes did you do? How many showed up? How many didn't show up? It's insane to me.
Well, I'll tell you, I'm doing a marketing conference with some of my friends who run digital marketing agencies this afternoon, and they're like, the biggest problem we have is like getting law firms to answer the phone. So they'll call the marketing agency and they're like, you're not doing anything for us. And then the marketing agency's like, well, you got 100 calls this month and you answered 30 of them. Like, answer them all. You'll make more money. Like, it's pretty simple math, to be perfectly honest.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, I do agree. I think it's changing, and I think it's interesting to me to watch the shift, because it's like you're trying to take a very unsexy, uncool profession, and you see like some, younger than me, and they're like, posting. I'm like, does the consumer care that you're like a cool attorney on the beach, like working on the beach? Like, I don't know. I don't know if that's really what like the consumer, wants. I do think they want an easier way to transact with you, whether that's over the phone, Zoom, take credit cards. You don't have to pay with cash, like whatever it is.
Right.
But I don't,
Right.
I don't know that. I don't know, maybe it is, but I don't know that like the consumer out there is like, oh, my lawyer's awesome. He or she, works 4 hours a week from their,
Well, I
Punta
definitely don't
Cana.
think consumers want that. Like, if your entire marketing message is I drink daiquiris better than my
Right.
competition, you probably want to refocus that a little bit. Yeah, legal consumers want speed. They want help with a problem. They're super stressed out. So they want to know you're competent in the niche practice area, and they have to like you as well. But like, they don't have to like you because you don't work. They can like you because you're cool, approachable, and you also work. Like, that's part of it too.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I know we're coming up on our time. So what's the feedback been on the late night show that you're doing?
People love it. Like, it's
Yeah.
been really good. We've actually like increased the listenership since we've done it. And I think like we're into like this notion of like humanizing at this point, and the whole thesis behind changing the show is that all this lawyer specific content out there is like, you're right, it's like boring stuff that people have talked about forever, and you can talk about some of that, but if you couch it in the construct of like, we know you have wider interests than just this, and we're going to try to touch upon that in an entertaining way, I think it's a really unique offering, and it really humanizes attorneys, and I think attorneys need humanizing, frankly. If you look at the public perception of attorneys, it's like, it's not great. So the more you can
No,
humanize
we are
lawyers,
not
the
liked.
better.
We are not liked.
Yeah, like, I don't know. I don't know if there's a hug your lawyer day, but I don't see a lot of impetus for that necessarily.
No, even our clients hate us. It's all around terrible. It's all,
Well, it's
it's all
funny if you
around.
look at, not to get too far down the rabbit hole, but if you look at like NPS scores, net promoter scores for companies, like lawyers are on par with like credit card companies, cable providers, airplanes. And when was the last time you were like, man, that was a great flight? I'm going to just turn right back around and take another one. So, yeah, I think part of this
Yeah.
likability thing, humanizing thing is important, but it doesn't have to be like, hey, I'm on the beach working all the time. You can humanize yourself in other ways.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a whole nother topic, but very, very important, because I was thinking about it. I'm like, my legal industry, what I specialize in is probate, mainly probate after somebody has died. So I'm dealing with family members who hate each other. I'm already dealing with a sensitive topic. Most attorneys, divorce, criminal defense, like business disputes, it's all bad. It's so you got to find a way to overcome everyone just hating you. It's tough because they're paying you, they don't want to pay you. It's tough. So the humanizing is great, man. Well, Jared, how can people find you? What's the name of podcast and everything so they can listen?
Oh yeah. So I would a couple different ways. Like if you want consulting information, you can go to redcavelegal.com. Software companies at gideon.legal. And then the podcast is at Legal Talk Network. It's called the Legal Toolkit Podcast.
Awesome, man. Definitely going to check that out. Jared, brother, appreciate it, man. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks. This is fun. Have a great day.
Take care. Bye.